Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison pressed his back against the rocky outcrop, feeling the cold mountain stone through his tactical vest. The Afghan mountains stretched endlessly around his 8-man SEAL team, their jagged peaks cutting sharp lines against the star-filled sky. 3 days into what should have been a simple reconnaissance mission, everything had gone wrong. The intelligence reports had been clear. A high-value Taliban commander was meeting with foreign fighters in a remote village nestled between 2 ridges. The mission was straightforward: observe, document, and call in the coordinates for an airstrike. Clean and simple, the kind of operation Morrison had run dozens of times during his 12 years as a SEAL. But nothing about this mission had been clean or simple. Morrison adjusted his night vision goggles and scanned the valley below. Somewhere in that darkness, his team was scattered and pinned down by enemy fire. What started as a covert observation had turned into a running firefight when a local shepherd stumbled upon their position just after sunset. The shepherd's panicked shouts had echoed across the valley, alerting the Taliban fighters below. Within minutes, muzzle flashes lit up the mountainside as automatic weapons opened fire from multiple positions. Morrison's team had been forced to break cover and retreat up the slope, but the enemy had anticipated their movement. Bravo 2, report. Morrison whispered into his radio, using the call sign for Petty Officer Richards, his demolitions expert. Static crackled back through his earpiece. Then Richards' voice, strained and breathless. 6 tangos advancing on my position. Low on ammo. Can't hold much longer. Morrison's jaw tightened. Richards was pinned behind a cluster of boulders about 200 meters down the slope. The young petty officer had taken shrapnel in his leg during the initial contact and couldn't move fast enough to reach higher ground with the rest of the team. Charlie team, what's your status? Morrison called to his other 4 men positioned along the ridgeline. We're good up here, boss, came the reply from Chief Petty Officer Martinez, Morrison's second-in-command. But we can't get a clean shot on the guys moving toward Richards. Too much dead space. Morrison studied the terrain through his night vision. The enemy fighters were using the natural cover of rocks and scrub brush to advance up the slope. They moved with discipline and coordination that suggested military training, not the usual tactics of local Taliban fighters. A burst of automatic fire erupted from below, followed by Richards' voice on the radio. They're getting closer. Maybe 50 meters now. Morrison made his decision. Charlie team, lay down covering fire on my mark. I'm going down to get Richards. Negative, sir. Martinez responded immediately. Too exposed. They'll cut you down before you make it halfway. But Morrison was already moving, sliding down the rocky slope using shadows and terrain features for concealment. He'd never left a man behind in 12 years of combat operations, and he wasn't starting now. The sound of gunfire intensified as his team opened up from the ridgeline, their suppressed weapons sending streams of bullets toward the advancing enemy fighters. Morrison used the distraction to cover ground quickly, bounding from rock to rock in the darkness. He was 50 meters from Richards' position when the night exploded in light. A flare burst overhead, casting harsh shadows across the mountainside and illuminating Morrison in the open. Enemy muzzle flashes erupted from 3 different positions as bullets whined past his head. Morrison dove behind a low stone wall, feeling chips of rock sting his face as rounds impacted inches from his head. He was trapped in the open, caught between the enemy fighters and Richards' position. His team's covering fire from the ridgeline wasn't enough to suppress all the enemy positions. Boss, you need to get out of there, Martinez called over the radio. We count at least 12 fighters moving up the slope. This is turning into a coordinated assault. Morrison peered around the edge of the wall and immediately jerked back as bullets sparked off the stones. The enemy had him triangulated. Every time he tried to move, crossfire from multiple positions drove him back to cover. Through his earpiece, he heard Richards' labored breathing. Sir, I can see muzzle flashes 30 meters below my position. They're almost on top of me. Morrison checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left, plus 1 fragmentation grenade. Not enough to fight his way through to Richards and back to the team. The mathematics of the situation were brutally clear. He was pinned down, his man was about to be overrun, and enemy reinforcements were climbing the mountain toward his team's position on the ridgeline. For the first time in his military career, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison faced the possibility that he might have to make an impossible choice between saving one man and losing them all. The flare above began to fade, casting dancing shadows across the rocky mountainside. Morrison pressed himself deeper behind the stone wall as bullets continued to chip away at his cover. Each impact sent razor-sharp fragments flying, and he could feel warm blood trickling from small cuts on his face and hands. Through his radio, he heard the unmistakable sound of close combat from Richard's position. Shouts in Pashto mixed with the distinctive crack of an M4 carbine firing on semi-automatic. Richards was making his last stand. "All stations, this is command." Morrison spoke into his radio, using the formal procedure that meant he was about to give final orders. "We have multiple enemy forces converging on our position. Estimate company strength opposition, with possible reinforcements en route." Chief Martinez's voice came back immediately. "Sir, we can call for close air support. F-18s are 30 minutes out." Morrison shook his head, even though his team couldn't see him. "Negative. Too close to friendly positions, and we can't mark our location with this much enemy fire." He pulled out his GPS unit and quickly calculated distances and elevations. The nearest landing zone for helicopter extraction was over 3 kilometers away across difficult terrain. With Richards injured and enemy forces pursuing them, they'd never make it. Another burst of automatic fire erupted from Richards' position, followed by an ominous silence. "Bravo 2, report." Morrison called into his radio. No response. "Richards, come in." Still nothing. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. In 12 years of leading men into combat, he'd never lost anyone under his command. The possibility that Richards might be dead or captured made his hands shake with rage. A new voice crackled through his earpiece, speaking accented English. "American soldiers, we have your friend. Surrender now, and we let him live." The transmission was coming through Richards' radio. Morrison's blood ran cold. The enemy had either killed or captured his demolitions expert, and was now using his equipment to communicate. Martinez's voice cut through the static. "Sir, movement on the ridgeline above us. Looks like they're trying to get behind our position." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Morrison realized the Taliban fighters weren't just conducting a random attack. This was a coordinated ambush designed to capture or kill American Special Operations Forces. Someone had leaked their mission details, or they'd walked into a carefully prepared trap. Morrison made a quick decision. "Charlie Team, begin withdrawal to Rally Point Alpha. I'll provide covering fire from here." "Negative, sir. We're not leaving without you and Richards." "That's a direct order, Chief. Get the team to safety." Martinez's response was predictably stubborn. "With all due respect, sir, go to hell. We don't leave anyone behind." Despite the desperate situation, Morrison felt a surge of pride in his men. They were willing to die rather than abandon their teammates, even when ordered to retreat by their commanding officer. A fresh burst of enemy fire forced Morrison to duck lower behind his wall. He could hear voices getting closer, speaking in Pashto and what sounded like Arabic. Foreign fighters, just as the intelligence reports had indicated. Morrison pulled the pin on his fragmentation grenade and let the spoon fly free, counting off 3 seconds before hurling it toward the nearest muzzle flashes. The explosion lit up the mountainside, followed by screams and shouted commands in multiple languages. The momentary confusion gave Morrison enough time to sprint toward a larger boulder cluster 20 meters up the slope. Bullets whined past his ears as he dove behind the rocks, but he'd gained some ground toward Richards' last known position. As he caught his breath, Morrison heard something that made his blood freeze. The distinctive sound of helicopter rotors echoing off the mountain valleys, but these weren't American aircraft. The engine noise was all wrong, with the characteristic whop-whop-whop of old Soviet-era helicopters. Charlie team, we have rotary wing aircraft inbound from the south. Not ours. Martinez confirmed what Morrison already knew. Roger that. Looks like me, 24 Hines. At least 2 aircraft. The appearance of attack helicopters changed everything. Even if Morrison's team could fight their way out of the immediate ambush, they couldn't outrun helicopter gunships across open mountain terrain. Morrison checked his watch. 26 minutes until American air support could reach their position. The F-18 Hornets would make short work of the helicopters, but his team had to survive long enough for the jets to arrive. The enemy voices were getting closer now, and Morrison could make out individual words through his basic understanding of Pashto. They were coordinating a final assault on his position, planning to take him alive if possible. Through his night vision goggles, Morrison spotted movement among the rocks below. At least 6 fighters were advancing in a coordinated rush, while others provided covering fire from concealed positions. Professional tactics executed with military precision. Morrison raised his M4 carbine and selected targets, but he knew the mathematics of the fight. 6 rounds left in his current magazine, plus 1 full magazine in his vest, against at least 12 enemy fighters with helicopter support incoming. As the enemy fighters closed to within 50 meters, Morrison keyed his radio one final time. Charlie team, if we don't make it out of this, make sure command knows we walked into a setup. Someone leaked our mission. The first enemy fighter appeared around the edge of a boulder, assault rifle raised and scanning for targets. Morrison placed his crosshairs center mass and squeezed the trigger. Morrison's first shot took the lead fighter's center mass, dropping him instantly behind the boulder. The remaining enemy fighters immediately took cover and began laying down suppressive fire, their muzzle flashes creating a deadly light show across the mountainside. Bullets sparked off the rocks around Morrison's position as he shifted to find a better angle. Through his night vision, he could see the enemy fighters moving in short bounds, using fire and movement tactics to close the distance. These weren't local Taliban fighters. They moved with the precision of trained soldiers. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder, echoing off the valley walls. Morrison risked a quick glance skyward and saw the running lights of 2 aircraft approaching from the south. The Mi-24 Hines were flying low and fast, their pilots using the terrain to mask their approach. Charlie team, those helicopters will be on top of us in 2 minutes, Morrison reported through his radio. You need to find hard cover now. Chief Martinez responded from the ridgeline. Already on it, sir. We're moving to the cave system we spotted during approach. But we can't leave you exposed down there. Morrison fired 3 quick shots at movement between the rocks, then ducked as return fire chewed up the stone above his head. His ammunition situation was becoming critical. 4 rounds left in his current magazine, plus 1 backup. Through his earpiece, Morrison heard a new transmission on Richard's capture radio. This time the voice spoke in Arabic, giving what sounded like tactical instructions to the approaching helicopters. The first Mi-24 crested the ridgeline and immediately began circling the battlefield, its searchlights sweeping across the mountainside. The powerful beam turned night into day wherever it touched, eliminating any advantage Morrison's team had gained from darkness. Morrison pressed himself flat against the rocks as the searchlight passed just meters from his position. The helicopter's door gunner opened fire with a heavy machine gun, sending streams of tracers toward the ridgeline where his team had taken cover. The second helicopter took up a position on the opposite side of the valley, effectively boxing in Morrison's team between 2 sets of helicopter gunships. The tactical situation had gone from bad to impossible. Morrison heard Chief Martinez over the radio, his voice strained, taking heavy fire from both aircraft. Johnson's been hit, but he's mobile. We need to move deeper into the cave system. The searchlight from the first helicopter swept back toward Morrison's position. This time he couldn't avoid it completely. The brilliant beam caught the edge of his boulder cluster, forcing him to scramble to new cover as the door gunner opened fire. Heavy caliber rounds shattered the rocks where Morrison had been hiding just seconds earlier. The helicopter was so close he could feel the rotor wash, stirring up dust and debris around him. As Morrison sprinted toward a new position, something caught his attention through the chaos. A brief muzzle flash from high up on the opposite ridgeline, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle shot. The sound was different from the automatic weapons' fire filling the valley. This was the sharp, echoing boom of a precision rifle firing a heavy-caliber round. One of the enemy fighters advancing on Morrison's position suddenly spun around and dropped to the ground. A second rifle shot rang out, and another fighter collapsed behind his cover. Morrison pressed himself against a new boulder and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. Someone was providing sniper fire from the high ground, but it wasn't coming from his team's position. Chief Martinez and the others were pinned down in the cave system, and none of them carried precision rifles suitable for long-range shooting. A third shot echoed across the valley, and Morrison watched through his night vision as the searchlight on the first helicopter suddenly went dark. The aircraft immediately began evasive maneuvers, banking hard to the right as its pilot tried to identify the source of the rifle fire. The mysterious sniper was targeting both the enemy fighters and the helicopters. Morrison keyed his radio. "Charlie team, do we have anyone in an overwatch position?" "Negative, sir," Martinez replied immediately. "We're all accounted for in the cave. That's not one of ours." Morrison studied the ridgeline where the shots were coming from through his night vision goggles. The position was at least 800 meters away, an extremely difficult shot under combat conditions. Whoever was up there possessed exceptional marksmanship skills. A fourth shot rang out, and Morrison saw sparks fly from the second helicopter as the round impacted somewhere near the engine compartment. The aircraft immediately began trailing smoke and initiated an emergency landing sequence. The enemy fighters on the ground had also noticed the sniper fire and were now divided between advancing on Morrison's position and trying to identify this new threat. Their coordinated assault had been disrupted by the unexpected intervention. Morrison took advantage of the confusion to change positions again, moving closer to where he'd last heard from Richards. The mysterious sniper had bought him precious time, but he still had a man unaccounted for and enemy forces between him and his team. As he moved through the rocks, Morrison caught glimpses of muzzle flashes from the sniper's position. The rate of fire was deliberate and measured, each shot carefully aimed rather than rapid suppressive fire. Professional shooting from someone who understood battlefield conditions. Another enemy fighter went down to a precise headshot, just as Morrison reached the boulder cluster where Richards had made his last stand. He found blood on the rocks and drag marks leading down the slope, but no body. Richards had been taken alive. The first helicopter had landed in the valley and disgorged a squad of fighters who were now advancing on foot toward Morrison's position. The second aircraft was still smoking, but remained airborne, its pilot maintaining distance from the mysterious sniper. Morrison counted at least 15 enemy fighters now closing in on his position from multiple directions. Even with the sniper's intervention, the odds were overwhelming. His team was trapped in the cave system, Richards was captured, and enemy reinforcements continued to arrive. But for the first time since the mission had gone sideways, Morrison felt a spark of hope. Someone with exceptional skills was providing fire support from the high ground. The question was whether this unknown ally could tip the balance long enough for Morrison's team to survive until air support arrived. Morrison pressed himself against the blood-stained rocks where Richards had made his final stand, trying to piece together what had happened to his missing teammate. The drag marks in the loose gravel told a clear story. Richards had been wounded, but alive when they took him. Another precise rifle shot echoed from the distant ridgeline, and Morrison watched one of the advancing helicopter troops drop immediately. The marksmanship was extraordinary, considering the range and difficult lighting conditions. Whoever was providing this fire support possessed skills that matched or exceeded the best military snipers Morrison had worked with. The remaining Mi-24 helicopter had moved to a safer distance and was now hovering behind a mountain spur, using the terrain to mask its position from the mysterious sniper. but its crew was still coordinating the ground assault through radio communications Morrison could intercept on his equipment. "Charlie team, I need a situation report," Morrison called to his men in the cave system. Chief Martinez responded immediately. "We're secure for now, but Johnson's bleeding pretty bad from that helicopter run. We need to get him medical attention soon." Morrison checked his watch. 18 minutes until American air support arrived. Too long for Johnson if his wounds were serious, and too long for Morrison to remain pinned down in the open with multiple enemy forces closing in. The sniper fired again, and Morrison saw the muzzle flash clearly this time through his night vision goggles. The shooter was positioned on a rocky outcrop approximately 800 meters away, commanding excellent fields of fire across the entire valley. It was a textbook sniper position, offering concealment and multiple escape routes. But something about the shooting pattern seemed familiar to Morrison. The deliberate pace, the exceptional accuracy, the tactical understanding of when to engage and when to wait. These were the hallmarks of American military training, specifically the kind of advanced marksmanship instruction provided to elite special operations forces. A burst of automatic weapons fire from below forced Morrison to duck lower behind his cover. The enemy fighters were getting bolder now, advancing in coordinated rushes while their comrades provided covering fire. They'd adapted to the sniper threat by moving in smaller groups and using better concealment. Morrison raised his M4 and engaged two fighters who had moved too far into the open. His first shot was a clean hit, but the second fighter managed to dive behind cover before Morrison could adjust his aim. 2 rounds left in his magazine now, plus his final backup. The radio crackled with another transmission in Arabic, and Morrison heard the helicopter pilot receiving new instructions. Through his night vision, he watched the Mi-24 begin a wide, circling maneuver, staying low and using terrain features to approach the sniper's position from an unexpected angle. Morrison keyed his radio. "Unknown sniper. This is SEAL Team Commander Morrison. You have helicopter moving on your position from the northwest. Break contact and relocate now." For several seconds, only static answered Morrison's transmission. Then, a gravelly voice responded in clear American English. "Roger that, Commander. Been tracking the helicopter. Thanks for the heads up." The accent was distinctly American, with the flat vowels of the upper Midwest. But more importantly, the voice carried the calm confidence of someone completely comfortable in combat situations. This wasn't a frightened civilian or nervous ally fighter. This was a professional warrior. "Who am I speaking to?" Morrison asked, but received no response. The sniper fired 3 rapid shots in succession, each round precisely placed. Morrison watched through his night vision as the helicopter pilot was forced to break off his approach run, taking evasive action as bullets struck the aircraft's armored hull. On the ground, 2 more enemy fighters went down to the sniper's fire. The remaining attackers were now seeking better cover and reconsidering their assault plan. The mysterious marksman had successfully disrupted their coordinated attack and bought Morrison precious time. But Morrison knew the respite wouldn't last long. The enemy commander was clearly experienced and would adapt his tactics to neutralize the sniper threat. Already Morrison could see small teams of fighters beginning to move toward the base of the sniper's ridgeline. Morrison made a tactical decision. Rather than waiting for the enemy to reorganize, he would use the confusion to advance toward the valley floor where he'd seen the helicopter land its troops. If Richards was still alive, that's where they would be holding him. Moving carefully from rock to rock, Morrison began descending the slope. Each bound brought him closer to enemy positions, but also closer to potential rescue of his captured teammate. The sniper continued providing overwatch, dropping any enemy fighter who exposed himself too clearly. As Morrison reached a cluster of boulders halfway down the slope, his radio crackled again. "Commander, this is your overwatch. You're moving into a kill zone. 3 fighters in concealed positions directly ahead of you." Morrison froze and studied the terrain ahead through his night vision. At first he saw nothing, but then caught the faint outline of a rifle barrel protruding from behind a low stone wall 30 meters ahead. I see one position. Morrison whispered into his radio. Where are the other two? One at your 2 o'clock, behind a large boulder with a split top. Second one at your 10 o'clock, dug in behind the fallen tree trunk. Morrison scanned the areas the sniper had identified and eventually spotted both positions. The enemy fighters were well concealed and positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Anyone advancing down the slope would walk into a deadly crossfire. Can you take them? Morrison asked. Negative. Angles are wrong for my position, and if I relocate now, the helicopter will spot my movement. Morrison was trapped again, caught between the hidden fighters ahead and the larger enemy force pursuing him from behind. His ammunition was nearly exhausted, and his team remained pinned down in the cave system with a wounded man requiring medical attention. Through his earpiece, Morrison heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of Richard's voice, weak but unmistakably alive, coming through the captured radio. Tell my team, tell them I held the line. The transmission cut off, replaced by the enemy commander speaking in Arabic. They were using Richards to psychologically pressure Morrison's team, but the message also confirmed that his demolitions expert was still alive somewhere below. Hearing Richards' voice gave Morrison a surge of determination that cut through his tactical assessment of the hopeless situation. His man was alive, which meant the mission wasn't over. Morrison had never abandoned a teammate in 12 years of combat operations, and he wasn't about to start now. Overwatch, I need you to create a distraction, Morrison transmitted to the mysterious sniper. Something to draw attention away from my movement. What did you have in mind, Commander? Morrison studied the terrain below, formulating a desperate plan. The enemy helicopter was still hovering behind the mountain spur, coordinating the ground assault through radio communications. If the sniper could force it back into the open, the resulting chaos might give Morrison the opportunity he needed. That helicopter is the enemy commander's eyes and ears. Take it down, and their coordination falls apart. There was a pause before the sniper responded. That's a hell of a shot at this range, especially with that pilot staying smart behind cover. Can you do it? Another pause, longer this time. Morrison could almost hear the sniper calculating angles, wind conditions, and aircraft movement patterns through the static. I can make the shot, but I'll need the helicopter to expose itself. Got any ideas? Morrison checked his remaining ammunition one final time. 2 rounds in his current magazine, plus 1 full backup magazine. Not much for what he was planning, but it would have to be enough. Give me 60 seconds, then watch for my signal. Morrison began moving parallel to the slope, using the terrain to mask his movement from the 3 concealed enemy positions ahead. He wasn't advancing toward them anymore, but rather positioning himself for a flanking maneuver that would force the helicopter to respond. 50 meters to his left, Morrison spotted what he was looking for. A small depression in the mountainside that would provide temporary cover while giving him a clear line of sight to the helicopter's hiding position. Morrison sprinted across the open ground, expecting enemy fire at any moment. But the 3 fighters ahead were still focused on the direct approach route, not watching for lateral movement. He dove into the depression just as automatic weapons fire erupted from behind him. The pursuing enemy force had finally caught up to his previous position and was now engaging the empty rocks with concentrated fire. Their mistake gave Morrison the opportunity he needed. Morrison raised his M4 carbine and fired both remaining rounds at the helicopter's hiding position. The bullets sparked harmlessly off the mountain spur, but they achieved their intended purpose. The helicopter pilot, thinking he was under direct attack, immediately pulled the aircraft around the spur to identify the source of fire. For just a few seconds, the Mi-24 was fully exposed in Morrison's line of sight. More importantly, it was exposed to the sniper on the distant ridgeline. The rifle shot came immediately, the sound rolling across the valley like thunder. Morrison watched through his night vision as the helicopter's main rotor shattered in a shower of metal fragments. The aircraft immediately began spinning uncontrollably, auto-rotating toward a hard landing in the valley floor. The helicopter crashed with tremendous force, sending up a cloud of dust and debris that obscured half the battlefield. But more importantly, the loss of their command and control platform threw the enemy ground forces into confusion. Morrison used the chaos to reload his final magazine and advanced toward the 3 concealed positions that had been blocking his route. Without helicopter oversight, the enemy fighters were operating blind, unsure of Morrison's exact location. The first fighter made the mistake of exposing himself to get a better view of the crash site. Morrison's shot took him center mass from 30 meters away. The second fighter, hearing the gunshot, turned toward Morrison's position and walked into a second well-aimed round. The third fighter, realizing his position was compromised, attempted to retreat down the slope. The sniper's rifle boomed again, and the fighter collapsed before he could reach cover. Morrison keyed his radio. Outstanding shooting, Overwatch. Route is clear to the objective. Roger that, Commander. But be advised, I'm seeing movement from multiple positions. Looks like they're regrouping around the helicopter crash site. Morrison began moving down the slope toward the valley floor, where smoke and flames marked the helicopter's impact point. If Richards was still alive, that's where Morrison would find him. As he approached the crash site, Morrison could hear voices shouting in Arabic and Pashto. The enemy forces were trying to reorganize, but the sudden loss of their command element had disrupted their tactical coordination. Through the smoke, Morrison spotted movement near a cluster of rocks 200 meters from the burning helicopter. Several figures were gathered around what looked like a wounded man on the ground. Even from a distance, Morrison could see the distinctive pattern of American digital camouflage. Richards was alive, but surrounded by enemy fighters using him as both prisoner and human shield. Any rescue attempt would have to be conducted with surgical precision to avoid hitting the captured SEAL. Morrison checked his watch. 8 minutes until American air support arrived. Close enough now that Morrison could hear the distant rumble of jet engines approaching from the north. Charlie Team, this is command, Morrison transmitted to his men in the cave system. Air support is inbound. I have eyes on Richard's position. Prepare for extraction to primary landing zone. Chief Martinez responded immediately. Roger, sir. Johnson stabilized, and we're ready to move on your command. Morrison studied the tactical situation one final time. Enemy forces were regrouping around Richard's position, but their coordination was broken. The mysterious sniper continued to provide overwatch from the ridgeline. American air power was minutes away. For the first time since the mission had gone sideways, Morrison believed they might all make it home alive. The sniper's voice crackled through his earpiece one final time. Commander, this is Staff Sergeant Mike Chun, 75th Ranger Regiment. Figured it was time for a proper introduction. Morrison smiled grimly as he prepared for the final phase of the rescue operation. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places, delivered by ghostly rifle fire from a distant ridgeline where a single ranger had been watching over them all along.